Terry Barber is a best-selling author and founder of Lighthouse Catholic Media. Jesse Romero is a retired law enforcement officer, a former kickboxing champion with a master's degree in theology. And together, they share a passion for evangelization and PhDs in common sense. You're listening to The Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. To join the show, call 888-526-2151. Here's Terry and Jesse.
Be merciful, O Lord, for we have sinned. What an appropriate psalm for today's show. Psalm 51. Yep, we're all sinners. We've all sinned. That was a great Davidic psalm written by King David. You know, today's going to be a show really for adults. So if you have young people, if you have children that are near the radio, you may want to remove them for the show because we're going to be talking about very mature things based on two Catholic articles that we have. One is by the Catholic World Report. So we would ask you to move your children for this holy hour of power because we want to talk to a mature audience about things, about the sexual revolution, to just be honest with you, okay?
That's it.
And before we get into the article so you can remove your children, I just take courage in the gospel today at Holy Mass. Not only in today's Psalms, which King David, admits that he's a sinner. We're all sinners, so we're not sharing these articles on sexual revolution because we're perfect. We're sharing it because we're two broken men ourselves, two broken sinners in need of God's grace, which reminds me also of today's gospel. If you didn't read it at Mass, it's Matthew 14, verse 22 to 36. I love it because all of us are with Jesus in the boat. What boat are we on? It's called the Catholic Church. It's called the Bark of Peter.
Amen.
And the apostles were with Jesus on the boat. And guess what? They went to sleep. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, they were terrified because there was a storm and there was waves. That's the way we are as Catholics today. Sometimes, we're in the church, we're in the boat, but things are kind of scary because when we look out there, we call it what John Paul II calls the culture of death. It's vicious, it's brutal, as you're going to see in today's articles. But we have to go back to what Jesus Christ told the apostles. He tells us the same things. He says, take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. So think about these words for the rest of the day. Jesus is telling you, take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid. And remember, the apostles thought they saw a ghost. No, Jesus isn't a ghost. He's the resurrected Son of God. And what do the apostles tell Jesus when they recognize Jesus? They said, Lord, save me. Say that throughout the day. Lord, save me from my sin. Lord, save me from the culture of death. And Lord, save me from falling and dying in mortal sin. Terry, what's the topic today?
Well, the topic is a serious one. And I want to just say what Jess just said. If you have little ones, please remove them from the listening of this show because this is sick. I mean, we could be talking about banners and balloons right now, but, there's a fire going on in the world, and it's the fire alarm is a loud one right now, but very few people hear it, and it's the sexual revolution that we just are going through. And there's an article, as Jess said, that from the Catholic World Report, it's about sexual pollution is a scientific and destructive fact. It's on our website, catholicrc.org and jesseromero.com. I can't read this. I can't read some of the stuff because it's so bad in the sense of morally. But my point to you is it possible, my friend, that pollution of sexuality is in the same way we can talk about pollution of the air? Like, for example, do you think that our sexual environment is as polluted as China's air? Do you think it could cause such pollution as scientifically demonstrated? Well, I'm going to say yes to you on that question. And the reader who's in this article, he says, forgive me, because I hope, I don't want to have to talk about this, but we need to talk about it because the world is going down to destruct itself because it's using its sexual faculties according to man rather than to God. And so I'll use the analogy, talking about some of the evil effects of dumping raw sewage into the streams. Hey, it's much more less embarrassing than examining the evils of dumping of our raw sewage of our sexuality in our culture. But the seriousness of the contemporary sexual pollution demands that we address these things and also give us an answer to these questions, which the Catholic Church has, and no one else has this. I always say that when we give you this article, and we will tell you this, that implementing the Catholic Church teachings is good for the economy. And I'll tell you why later, because of how much money we're spending on people who are using their sexual faculties not according to God's will. And by the way, I'm going to give away Life-Giving Love, Discover the Christian Meaning of Sex and Marriage by Dr. Scott Hahn, and you can get The Two Shall Become One by Fulton Sheen. I'm feeling very generous today because I'm giving away a $65 CD set by Dr. Scott Hahn on the book of Revelation called The End. You can download it, so write this number down. You text this number, 213-357-2346. I'll repeat it later in the show, too. 213-357-2346. Type the word Sheen, like for Bishop Sheen, S-H-E-E-N, and hit send. Give us your email address. You'll get a link for 13 90-minute presentations by Dr. Scott Hahn on the book of Revelation. I would encourage you to do that. But I want to ask Jesse, because he's a cop. He's seen a lot of this stuff in front of him. And Jess, this article is really what's happening out there today in the world. Is it a fair statement to say that?
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
I'm just breathing a sigh of relief
Yeah.
as I'm just trying to see how we can process this article on Catholic radio, because it's so good. It's written by Catholic World Report, but again, we ask you to remove your children for the next hour, because we're going to be talking about some adult topics, and the article is called, again it's called "Sexual Pollution is a Scientific and Destructive Fact." Now, here's what I'm saying. My comment.
Wow.
Personally, I'm not so worried about the pollution of the air. I'm more worried about the pollution of the soul.
Yep.
And this article really nails it. Let me try to be as tender, as ginger as possible here. Okay. Most of us, and everybody who watches television, there's several times when commercials are run on every. The only commercials that they don't run this on is EWTN. It's on every single channel. You guys know what I'm talking about. You know what commercial it is, okay? The article talks about it. It's I won't say the name. It's ED. Y'all know what I'm talking about. That commercial is played on a loop in every single channel except EWTN. And here's what the article says. So we'll just use the abbreviation ED. Okay, in case there's kids there. The article says there's quite literally a worldwide epidemic of ED among young men less than 40 years old. While it is quite natural to have problems of this sort in men over 40, although it has been made worse by increasing obesity and the diabetes that often comes with it, a significant rise in the number of young men with ED is historically unprecedented. In one study, 1 in 4 men seeking treatment for ED was under 40 years old, setting off an alarm for clinicians. In another, a third of young men were suffering from ED. A study in Italy uncovered a doubling of ED in teenagers in just 8 years, from 2005 to 2013. And a study in Canada found that over 50% of male teens reported some ED symptoms, with half of those being severe, close quote. Now, the article is going to go why. It's going to give the reasons why this is happening, which I find I've kind of known it because I've studied the issue of pornography for years.
Yep.
And the article is going to make the connection between this commercial that's run on a loop on your television over and over and why this is happening to younger and younger men. Terry?
Jesse, you've done a great job keeping it on that level, because internet porn coupled with obsessive in abusing yourself. See how we're being very careful on the radio, but you know what I'm talking about. The internet is a pipeline that dumps raw sexual sewage into our sexual environment at a level unprecedented historically. Now, here's my point. When you do things according to your will, in other words, your pleasure, can you eat ice cream every single day and that's all you eat? What happens to the body? You have effects on your body, don't you? So if people are abusing their sexual faculty, do you think by God's design that the body is going to be affected. You know, God forgives whatever sins we have. Jesse said that at the beginning of the show, but nature never forgives. We're going to show you in this article how many people have STDs, and it's not for theology degrees. We're talking about sexually transmitted diseases, and this is why, because they're using their sexual faculty not according to God's will. There's so much more here. Again, forgive us, but we had to bring this topic up because the world is going down. It's like the Titanic, and everybody's dancing thinking everything's cool. Well, let me tell you something. The world right now is heading straight down, and here at Immaculate Heart Radio, we're trying to pull as many people up to heaven by giving them the teachings of Christ and His church on sexuality. And if you want to get a wonderful set on CD, because 57% of divorces end up because one of them were addicted to pornography, get The Two Shall Become One. That's what statistics show us. The Two Shall Become One by Fulton Sheen. Call 877-526-2151. And we want you to be a high information Catholic. Pick up for free a download of the Book of Revelation, Dr. Scott Hahn's course from Steubenville, Ohio, by calling 213-357-2346. Text write the word Sheen, S-H-E-E-N, hit send after you put your email address, and we'll get you a hookup where you can actually get a link for the Book of Revelation by Dr. Scott Hahn for free. Yes, I said free. It's yours. I want you to be well-versed with the Book of Revelation. You're listening to the Terry and Jesse Show. We're talking about the sexual revolution, and when we come back, we're going to give you some more information that's going to shock you to know that you need to live that Catholic faith. It's good for the economy when we're chaste. We'll be right back after a quick break.
Back to the Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. Want to join the conversation? Call 888-526-2151. Now here's Terry and Jesse.
The apostles today in the gospel are afraid. They're in a boat. In Matthew 14:22, they tell Jesus, Lord, save me. That's what I'm saying. As I read this article, I'm saying, Lord, save us. The article that we're drawing from was written by Catholic World Report. It's very good. If you have children, please remove them for the remainder of the show because we're going to be talking about some adult content. We're going to keep the language, obviously, very pure, very Catholic. But some of the facts, scientific facts, are probably should not be heard by young people at this point. The article is called "Sexual Pollution is a Scientific and Destructive Fact." That's what the name of the article is. It's on CatholicRC.org and it's on JesseRomero.com. Here's what one section of the article says: there are several causal factors, including increased obesity in the young, as well as the use of illegal drugs, but one cause stands out with great clarity. The worldwide epidemic of ED is made possible by the worldwide availability of internet porn coupled with obsessive, and this word's in the catechism, so I'll use it, and it's in the article, with obsessive masturbation. Now, here's the scientific part of it, which I find fascinating. It says, as scientists now understand, addiction of any kind, including sexual addiction, hijacks the brain's natural reward system, primarily by overworking the pleasure neurotransmitter dopamine. When our pleasure center in the brain is continually overstimulated, it responds by dulling down, by producing less dopamine or eliminating dopamine receptors. That makes the addict continually look for a stronger fix, spending ever more time chasing ever more unnatural sexual stimuli. This is all scientifically verifiable as part of the larger research done into addiction of all kinds and its measurable deleterious effects on the human brain. Now, here's my comment. Okay? Here's my perspective. God gave us sexual intimacy within the confines of the sacrament of marriage.
Amen.
And guess what? It's a gift that God has given us. And all things that God has given us should be used in moderation. Notice the key word, what I just said, use in moderation. Yes, even sexual intimacy within marriage. But what this article is demonstrating people that are sexually addicted to disordered sexual appetites, the article is saying that they're overworking the pleasure center in their brain. And their brain is basically shutting down. They're saying too much work, too much stimuli, I can't handle it, and it's shutting down. So what do these people have to do now? They have to find a stronger fix to try to get the brain to reboot again. And this is all a result of the failed sexual revolution that hit America in the 60s.
And that's why the Catholic Church has beautiful teachings about marital love that the world is in great need of. Back in 1968, Pope Paul VI wrote a document called Humanae Vitae, and that document showed and actually foresaw the sexual deviations that were going to be coming. He predicted all these things back in 68. Thank you, Pope Paul VI. Also, let me give you my take, and then we'll go to the next paragraph. My take on it is, like I've said before, there's a song they sing in hell, I did it my way. See, I can't judge these people. I can only say objectively what they're doing is wrong. Okay, it's sinful to use your faculty not according to the way God designed it. But there's a song they sing in heaven, I did it His way. And so when we use our faculties according to God's will, and our marriage is according to what He teaches us, then we're much happier. And here's the challenge right now. The world is confused right now. They're saying, what? And that's why we Christians have to share the good news with these people about family life, about marriage, by our good, holy families. So many more times, it's more by example than by words. Now, the cycle of addictions, this is the article speaking now, I quote, this cycle of addiction leads to further destruction of our sexuality and our sexual environment. The first kind of destruction, it's social, or rather, it strikes at the very heart of the social order. Marriage. I'm going to step in and say St. John Paul II said it in 1994 with the letter to the families. The way the family goes is the way the culture goes. So you tear up the marriages where 54% of all marriages that end in divorce, the attorneys say
56.
56%. Thank you, Jesse. They all end up in divorce because somebody was using, pornography. Now, the Academy of that's right, 56%. 1,600 lawyers were dealing with this divorce issue. And as Jess said, 60% because it was a result of spouses' obsession with pornography. Now, if human marital love is the perfection of our sexual nature, that the article says, then this is decidedly destructive and unnatural result. Now, we know what the church teaches. The scientists are just catching up and saying, the Catholic Church has got it right. As sociologists and psychologists attest, destroyed families are the leading source of every kind of social disorder and pathology. This is what the church has taught for 2,000 years. Let's get the word out.
Let me make a comment on what Terry just read from the article. Mm-hmm. Especially the last sentence that Terry just read that nailed it. It says, as sociologists and psychologists attest, destroyed families are a leading source of every kind of social disorder and pathology. Pathology means disease, okay? Here's my comment. I'm a retired LA deputy sheriff. I can tell you this. The children of destroyed families feed the criminal justice system. Is this microphone on?
Say it again, man. That's
okay. The children of destroyed families feeds the criminal justice system. Everybody loses.
That's right.
And now let me switch gears to my spiritual warfare hat, because you guys know I'm a spiritual warfare devotee as well. Father Gabriel Amorth, in his first book that he wrote, An Exorcist
tells a story.
The first book, An Exorcist tells a story. On the first book, he says this. He says, the devil will use any means to get the person to destroy the human body.
Yep.
Close quote. Father Gabriel Amorth. The devil will use any means to get a human person to destroy the human body. As you read this article, he's doing it through pornography, because pornography, what happens there, it plants the seed of death.
Yep.
Okay? It plants the seed of death. Pornography, what does it do? It taps into our concupiscence, our human weakness. Pornography, it lowers our moral standards.
Yep.
Pornography makes us look at the sacredness of sexual intimacy, and now it becomes profane. It becomes natural. It becomes secular.
Recreational.
Exactly. And so now, as a result of pornography, this is the gateway to the other sins: fornication, cohabitation, prostitution, homosexuality, masturbation, abortion, orgies. The root cause of all of this is pornography. In other words, to remap or rewire a man's brain so they look at women not as children of God, but they reduce women as a result of what they've been looking at through pornography. Women are reduced to a private play toy. They're no longer viewed as children of God with dignity to be respected and beloved companions. They're objectified.
I'll give you an example. I'm not going to say the person's name, but on the phone, I talk to about 100 people a day, 80 to 100 and sometimes even more. And a gentleman had just gotten married, but he was addicted to pornography. And when he wanted to consummate his marriage, I'm just telling you the truth, he couldn't do it. You know why? His body, his mind was like Jesse just said, it was rewired. He couldn't have conjugal love with his wife because he abused himself with masturbation and pornography before he got married. That's a problem. I know it sounds terrible to have to say that, but you know what? There is healing with this. There really is. And the answer is Jesus Christ. When we come back from our break, we're going to continue to go through this article. I know this is laborious in the sense of hard to go through, but you know what? It's showing how decadent our culture has gotten and how important it is to give the good news of Jesus Christ. And again, I'm giving you the good news. Scott and Kimberly Hahn, as Protestant converts, did a series called Life-Giving Love, Discovering the Christian Meaning of Sex and Marriage. You can get a copy of that, the first CD, for free by calling 877-526-2151. Or you can get the Two Shall Become One. You need to have a strong catechetical teaching on the sacrament of marriage, because if you haven't been taught well, you're going to have a hard time staying married. And Bishop Sheen will do that for you. Call 877-526-2151. If you'd like Jess Romero to come to your parish and power preach on the sacrament of marriage, go to jesseromero.com. If you'd like me to come and talk on any topic, of especially the Fatima message right now, I'm going to be at St. Anthony's Parish this weekend on Saturday. They're doing a message of the 100th anniversary of Fatima at St. Anthony's in El Segundo, California. I'd love to see you there.
Here's one more point I want to make about the article before we take a break. Fulton Sheen today, I quote Fulton Sheen every day, Daily Reflection. It kind of segues with this article. Fulton Sheen, if you go to my website, jesseromero.com, click on Daily Reflections with Fulton Sheen. Today he says, does truth destroy freedom? Here's what he says. Is it true that the more you subscribe to divine truth, the less free you become? Before I went to school, I was free to believe, for example, that Shakespeare was born in 1224, but finally, I was told that Shakespeare was not born in 1224, but rather in 1564. I found out that education and truth was really restricting my freedom to fall into error. Before I went to school, I also thought that H2O was really the initials of a spy. Then I fell into the hands of a reactionary teacher. He stopped all of my liberalism. Do you know what he told me H2O meant? He said it was a symbol for water. Thus, the more I studied, the freer I became to know error. That's what Catholic Radio is all about. We've got to study so we fall free from error.
More in a moment.
This is Bishop David O'Connell, and you're listening to the Terry and Jesse Show at Immaculate Heart Radio.
Back to the Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio. Want to join the conversation? Call 888-526-2151. Now here's Terry and Jesse.
We're back. TJ, totally in love with Jesus. Terry and Jesse Show. We're two Catholics with a PhD in common sense. We've got an article. It's called Sexual Pollution is a Scientific and Destructive Fact. It's put out by Benjamin Weicker, Catholic World Report. Phenomenal article. And again, if you have children, remove them from the radio. This is a family show, and we're trying to be as prudent as possible with some of the terms here. But before we go back to the article, let me mention today are the Magnificat for those of you that have that devotional, there's a bishop here by the name of St. Peter Thomas, lived in 1366 A.D., okay? St. Peter joined the Carmelites in Paris in the 14th century. But here's what's fascinating about the article, about this saint. He dedicated his life to try to bring the Orthodox back to the Catholic Church. That was his mission. But the article also says that he fought in the Crusades. This is a bishop who fought in the Crusades back in 1365. Is this microphone on? Okay. And this bishop, St. Peter, he was injured during the Crusades, and as a result of his injury, he died 3 months later in the hospital. But I share this because he's a canonized saint in the Catholic Church, and he took up arms and fought in a just war. I just share that because I know there's some people that embrace extreme pacifism. Well, I can tell you this, Bishop St. Peter, pray for us, fought in a crusade, and he's now in heaven right now. Here's another point I want to make. I got an email. Jesse, Terry, what do I do if I wake up at 3 a.m. as a result of a nightmare? Okay? It's short. I wrote a response. You can get it on my blog. Every day I take the best question that I get in my email from the show, and I answer the best question. I don't answer all of them because we don't have 3 hours like Pat does, okay? So I could just take one question. So here's the way I responded. You can get my responses on my blog, jesseromero.com. Go to blog. So what do you do if you wake up at 3 a.m. as a result of a nightmare? Here's my response. The devil tries to imitate God. 3 p.m. is the hour of mercy for Christians. And I don't know if you knew that. For Satanists, 3 a.m. is the hour of evil. Church tradition teaches us that Jesus rose from the dead at 3 a.m. on Sunday. So for us, 3 a.m. is not the hour of evil. It's the hour of resurrection because we're followers of Christ. So whenever you wake up around 3 a.m., there's a strong tradition in the church through the testimony of various saints that your guardian angel may be waking you up so that you can pray for the souls in purgatory or because somebody else needs prayer that you may not even know about. The devil is afraid of three things, according to priests who perform exorcism: the name of Jesus, Mary, and St. Michael the Archangel. So if you feel frightened at 3 a.m. when you wake up from a nightmare, start praying the rosary or the chaplet of the Divine Mercy and say the St. Michael the Archangel prayer. I assure you, the evil one will flee. You'll fall asleep thinking about holy and pious thoughts immediately.
I want to add one more thought because at 1 o'clock, Christine Franklin's show, we're going to be doing it, filling in for her again. And guess what our topic is? Yeah, the 3 characteristics of the diabolic. And we're going to be playing something from Archbishop Sheen about the devil that you're not going to want to miss. That's at 1 o'clock. So here, Terry and Jesse are on from 11 to 12. Mother Miriam will come on. Right after Mother Miriam, we're going to have another hour with you, so tell your friends. This is the article that we're talking about right now. It's about the sexual pollution is a scientific and destructive fact. If you just came in, you say, what are you guys talking about? Well, go to jesseromero.com or catholicresource.org to get the article because there's so much in here that we can't even respond on the air because it wouldn't be appropriate. Because it's basically pointing out, if you just came on, to show how the deviation of our sexual revolution has basically destroyed many people. And I think that if we continue to go in this direction, it will destroy mankind because if you embrace the culture of what we're doing with this sexual revolution, then what you're doing is you're not going to be able to self-procreate because you're going to abuse that privilege and it'll be taken away. That's what science is telling us. And as a matter of fact, that confirms with what the Catholic Church teaches. So in addition to this is the article now, have you thought about this? Have you thought that social harm of addiction and porn, that there's a second kind of destruction that strikes at the naturalness of sexuality itself? Now, this isn't theologians. It's a biologist. He looks at other creatures in nature that reproduces through male and female sexual unions, right? And they will assure you that, amazingly, sexuality is naturally designed for sexual procreation. The Catholic Church talks about the unitive and procreative aspects of marriage. When a husband and wife come together in that intimacy, we have openness for sexual for promotion of the species and for union. Okay? So by contrast, the article says the cycle of sexual addictions drives human sexuality to the far limits of unnatural, right? And what happens to them? I'll tell you what, anything but heterosexual intercourse. In other words, we start going off and trying all kinds of weird things that I can't even talk about on the radio. The article will tell you what they are, but I can't say it. So that's why I'm encouraging you. Again, the Catholic Church has the answer to the sexual revolution. It's called monogamy. It's called chastity. I'm going to be married to one woman for life. That's the Catholic Church teachings, and we could solve a lot of problems and save about $16 billion a year that our country is spending on STDs. The Center of Disease Center in Atlanta, Georgia, tells us that. I could cut through using the Catholic faith teachings on marriage. I could cut the bill down for medical costs drastically if we would just live according to the gospel teachings on marriage.
The fact that God placed a sexual drive in every male and female, that's a good thing. God did that so that the species can continue to procreate. God gave us that drive. But if it's displaced, if it's taken outside of the context of the sacrament of marriage, then as the article says, it becomes unnatural, and it starts seeking a libidinous. Libidinous, what's that? It means sexually lustful.
Yep.
That's what it means.
Yep.
In other words, the article has this description that it's incredible. We can't even read it. But basically it says, when you take the sexual drive out of marriage, anything goes. Anything. And the article, says stuff like some of the mild stuff, pornography, sex with robots, computer-generated virtual sex, and other stuff I can't mention.
Nope. In
other words, this is what happens. People start doing things that are unimaginable, dangerous, torturous, demeaning, and damaging to each other when it's taken outside of the context of the sacrament of marriage. And here's a little bit of science here.
Yep.
It says this, and I'll break it down. I'll make it simpler. Imagine if we saw an animal species that no longer wanted to procreate.
Yep.
Okay. So let's just say we saw male lions. They lost their desire for procreate, and then all of a sudden we're saying, "Oh no, we've only got 5 lions on planet Earth because they're not procreating because the lions have ED. The lions have ED. They're not procreating." What would happen? We would go crazy, and we would try to find some solution to make sure that the male lions would continue to procreate. We would pull, we would do whatever humanly possible we can do to try to make these animals procreate so the species doesn't die out. Well, here's what's interesting. The human species is dying out.
Yep.
How do we know this? Because, again, this article talks about this lack of drive as a result of ED. And not only that, the human species is dying out as a result of the birth control pill.
Abortion.
Hey,
yep, of course.
An abortion. That combination right there, that's Satan's 1-2 punch that he uses. I mean, it's been available since 1960 and abortion since 1973. And these two, this 1-2 punch, contraception and abortion, has had a huge impact on sexual morality, on men and women, on engaging in all kinds of deviant sex and premarital sex, and without the fear of creating a family. And so now it's made our Western culture, it's made us feel free to indulge ourselves and abandon our responsibility to intercourse. And let me tell you, we've said it before in this program, who's the one that wants abortion to continue? I'll be honest, it's men. You know why? Abortion makes men irresponsible.
That's right.
Abortion makes men act like babies. That's why they call the magazine that these men read Playboy, because it keeps them spiritual and emotional midgets.
Well said, Jesse. Folks, I want to mention, are you going to a wedding this summer or in the fall? Give somebody the gift called The Two Shall Become One. It's 5 talks by Archbishop Sheen on marriage. It's such a huge advantage to get the Catholic Church teachings on marriage at the beginning or at the end. At least you get the message. You're welcome to get it. You just call 877-526-2151. You can also get it by catholicrc.org online. Or if you want two on-fire Catholic converts, Dr. Scott Hahn and Kimberly Hahn, this Life-Giving Love deals with the issue of birth control. Do you know somebody as a Catholic that might be practicing birth control? Are you ready for this? Like about 80% of the Catholics are doing that, okay? And here we are, like John the Baptist, the Terry and Jesse show, saying, don't do that. Do it God's way. You want to hear a great series on that, Life-Giving Love? Call us at 877-526-2151. Pick up Life-Giving Love. Give it away. You might even have some new babies coming along because you did that. Yes, call 877-526-2151 or go online to catholicrc.org. When we come back, we're going to give you some more information from this article that hopefully will show you that the Catholic Church has had that answer since the beginning for life and love.
This is Dr. Scott Hahn, and you are listening to the Terry and Jesse Show on Immaculate Heart Radio.
Truth has no color.
Amen.
We're not right versus left, we're right versus wrong. I love what Bishop Fulton Sheen said today in his daily reflection. It's on my blog, jessieromero.com. He basically said this: before I went to school, he says, I was a liberal. He says, I didn't know facts. He says, but then when I went to school, he says, I subscribed to divine truth and I became free. I was set free by divine truth. That's why we're sharing this article, because a lot of people don't know this in our church, even outside our church. And as a result, we tend to have these liberal, progressive thoughts. That basically means worldly thoughts. And we want to set you free with the truth. Look at what this doctor says in this article. Did you know about this? The doctor's name is Dr. Natalie Purcell, and she's a researcher. She says, we can map the downslide into the ever more unnatural in porn itself. Dr. Natalie Purcell has shown in depressing, nauseating detail, porn movies over the last 40 years have become increasingly violent and misogynist. That means hating women. With women being choked, suffocated, dragged by the hair, gang raped, slap punched, gagged, through all kinds of deviant sex to the point of vomiting and humiliated in other ways that I don't have the courage to report in this article. Hey, you don't even have to go that far. A movie that came out, 50 Shades of Grey.
That's exactly
everything
right.
that she just said
is there.
I haven't watched the movie, but everybody that I know that told me, everything that she just said in the article happened in that movie. Guess what? It was a bestseller.
Does that tell you
and
something?
The book broke all kinds of records. The article said here, this is Dr. Natalie, not me. The women who are abused in these porn movies, she says, either pretend to love it, the more abusive the better, or the women are shown actually suffering in their painful humiliation as real rape victims, both of which are meant to turn on porn addicts seeking new highs. Both of which, here it is, here's the science, both of which form the brains of porn viewers to associate their own sexual satisfaction with brutal and unnatural violations of women. All of this, we now understand, rewires the brain's pleasure system in regard to sexual desire, literally twisting natural sexual desire into ever more unnatural and self-destructive addictions. For the sexually malformed, only the unnatural is desirable. Let me quote Pope John Paul II here. This is exactly why St. John Paul II gave us his great corpus called Theology of the Body. He said it's because modern society has twisted sexual intimacy, and what we're called to do through proper Catholic teaching, through theology of the body, is to untwist the sexual immorality so that it can be set free again and operate as God intended.
You just nailed it. That's why we're doing this show. We don't like doing this. This is terrible to have to report to you, but let me give a concrete example of how it's rewriting the mind. a large airline company. I'll tell you, it's KLMN. Okay, that's the airlines. It's right on the internet. What they said was they have a picture of seatbelts. I just got off a plane, right? You know how you have a male part of a seatbelt and you put the male and the female to get your seatbelt to work? Yeah, that's how it works, right? They got pictures of two males coming together and two females coming together, and then they have a male and a female. Guess which one will buckle? The one that has a male and a female. So they're trying to be broad and say we serve all of everyone. Well, I'm going to tell you something. If you got a seatbelt with two males or two females, your seatbelt will not hold you in that plane. And I'm going to say this: if your deviation, I'll just be honest with you. I love homosexual people who have a tendency that to have same-sex attraction. I love them. The Catechism says we should respect them. But what I don't respect is when they act on it, because I'm called to chastity just like they are. So if we try to put two male seatbelts together, it won't work. And if you try and put two, like Father Don Calloway, I'll quote him. He said, marriage is not between two dudes or two chicks. It's between a man and a woman. I quoted Father Calloway on that. He's spot on. But the airlines is trying to make it look like you can have two male parts of the seatbelt or two females. What's the matter? It just won't work. Well, I got to tell you right now, having sexuality is great, but you have to do it by the way the designer designed it, and that's God, because when we do it God's way, we're fulfilled. When we try to deviate, you're going to have all kinds of depression. We see what happens to people who are sexually deprived in the sense of their misteachings on sexuality. They're very unhappy people. Suicide even. We see the statistics. The Catholic Church has the answer, and I might add, Bishop Sheen, his two shall become one on marriage, is a classic 5 talks on marriage. It's yours. You just call 877-526-2151. And then, as I said, I'm going to get in trouble. Over 80% of Catholics are for birth control. What? That's what statistically, hardly anybody follows it. Well, guess what?
I think it's higher.
It's going to be higher. But you know what? That doesn't mean I can't say stop, because God wants you to do it His way. That's why I'm giving life-giving love away, because people need to know the beauty of the Church's teachings on the transmission of life. Call 877-526-2151. And by the way, the last giveaway, before I turn it back to Jess, the book of Revelation. We're going to be talking about the devil at 1 o'clock on Christine Franklin's show, so don't forget it. We're giving away Dr. Scott Hahn's about 14 hours of Bible teaching from the Steubenville course that you'd pay $1,000 to go to. You're going to get it for free. All you got to do is dial 213-357-2346. Type the word Sheen, put your email address, send it, and you'll get a link, and you'll get very good teachings on the book of Revelation for free.
There's another article which basically it talks about the consequences of the first article.
Exactly.
It's called Increase in Extramarital Sex Leading to New STD Epidemics.
What are STDs? Sexually
transmitted diseases.
Okay.
So it quotes the World Health Organization, and they're saying that there's a super strain of gonorrhea that's been spread by deviant sex that has become antibiotic resistant. Now that's bad news.
Big time.
Now it says here this super gonorrhea came from statistics in 77 countries worldwide. Cases in France, Spain, Japan have proved incurable. Did you hear that? Incurable. Now the World Health Organization, it also says once again that the U.S. Center for Disease Control officially called this gonorrhea an urgent threat. And in the U.S., resistance to an antibiotic came from men having sex with men because of pharyngeal infection. What they're basically saying right now is that currently there are 3 known antibiotics being developed to combat gonorrhea, but they're not sure if these 3 drugs are going to be able to cure this problem. It also says approximately 78 million people become infected with gonorrhea every year through fornication or adultery or sex with a spouse who's been unfaithful. Untreated gonorrhea causes sterility and pelvic inflammatory disease. So 78 million people are infected a year in I think in the United States. This is global.
No, this
excuse
is
me,
global,
globally.
Jesse. Yeah,
Globally, yeah. And it also says in the last part of the paragraph, deviant sex. I can't. I'm just going to be general.
Yeah.
Deviant sex. It says can transmit several STDs such as gonorrhea, genital herpes, and syphilis. Popular Science reports that less than 1/3 of doctors test their patients for STDs unless specifically asked to do so. You know, there's a verse in the book of Revelation. I'll look it up right now. It basically says, it talks about diseases that God was bringing upon people in the first century for their sinful lifestyles. Well, I'll tell you one thing. The book of Revelation, as Dr. Scott Hahn says, that's simply a microcosm of what's going to happen at the end of time. And I remember Father Colby from the Marian movement of priests. I remember reading one of the books that he said that there will be diseases before the second coming of Christ. Father Colby says, Golby. He says there will be no cure for these diseases that will come about humankind before the second coming of Christ. Well, I'll tell you one thing. According to this article, he seems to be spot on.
Yeah, the article also points out that the drug companies aren't really excited about trying to make this happen because they don't see the drug being used on a long-term basis, so they can't justify the expense. I want to justify the expense of telling every one of us, myself included, repent and turn away from sin and receive the gospel. That's the message of Jesse and Terry here. That's the answer, everybody. We just said it.
Terry, and these drug companies, the reason the article says, they've said, well, we don't want to invest all this money. He says because these STDs, they start within themselves, they start morphing, and they're able now to fight that particular antibiotic.
There's no money to be made.
Yeah, so they're saying these things within themselves, they become like, they have their own mind, so to speak. They become so strong and they morph, and they're able to combat the antibiotics. So the drug companies are just saying, well, these STDs are fighting us, and they themselves, they change, and they're able to offset the antibiotics. So why even make an antibiotic? This doesn't look good for us.
Doesn't.
And all this tells us this. What does all this tell us? The sexual revolution has to admit one day that they were wrong.
Yep.
The sexual revolution was wrong. They are collapsing our society. And guess what? One day the whole world will say the Catholic Church was right about everything, including about sexual morality.
Well said. We're going to be on again in about an hour right after Mother's show. We're taking over for tomorrow for today and tomorrow for Christine Franklin. We'd love to have you come back in an hour. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the demonic at 1 o'clock. You wouldn't want to miss that. So join in here at Immaculate Heart Radio. And again, we thank you for your listening, and may God richly bless you and full sheen ahead. God.